because it's David Keogh that I was wanting to speak with. How are you, David? It's Tim Barker.
Hi Tim, how are you?
I'm not bad. I don't know if you remember me.
I know, I do remember a little.
Yes, we had a nice little short conversation in at the Macleay Island Community Hall.
Yeah.
A few years ago with when you were running against Peter Dowling and some Labor guy.
Yeah, well, I'm still running against Peter Dowling, it seems.
Yeah, you can't get away from him, can you?
Get away from the wanker.
Oh, carefully being recorded. I was getting around to that. Look, I'm recording you just so that I make sure I get everything absolutely dead right.
No, that's right, that's fine.
Yeah, it's always the
I
best.
stand by what I say.
Yeah, that's right. It's very true. You've got a very good reputation with every one of the candidates I've spoken with so far, actually.
Yeah.
You seem to be the gentleman of this particular race.
Well, Kim would have trouble being a gentleman, wouldn't she?
Yes, that's a very good point. Well picked up. I should try and brush up my interviewing skills. Well, my interviewing skills are virtually non-existent because I was always doing a print newspaper, but I've now moved into the 21st century and the paper is now online and it is doing so much better because of it.
Right.
Because I can do things like this and actually interview people.
And you can get the news out immediately as opposed to waiting for something to print.
Yeah, absolutely dead right there. There was a serious incident on Russell Island. I've got to be careful what I say because it hasn't been through to the coroner yet. And somebody died. No suspicious circumstances yet. But I had it up online inside of 3 hours.
Right.
And
that was quite recent, wasn't it?
yes, it was. That was just last Friday.
All right.
Just a week ago. And it's, I mean, I've been doing websites for 22 years now, so you think I would have learnt my lesson more quickly and moved over to online, but the technology is now available, so I'm going to use it.
Oh, good on you.
Just like I'm going to ask you some penetrating questions.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Okay. One of the most interesting and I think rather important questions, and it's a simple one, is weather protection for the pontoons, be it mainland or on the islands. Do you like getting rained on?
Well, the whole infrastructure issue, particularly in relation to the islands, is a debacle, and it's a third world country.
Yes, well, we're offshore. Maybe they should make us a detention centre.
Yeah, well, that's right.
It's about where it is, isn't it? So,
well, there are some people who view that they're in a detention centre because of the price of the barge and the restrictions that they have and the lack of infrastructure. But
well, that's very true. And there are more and more restrictions coming on us every week, it seems, with what we're allowed and not allowed to take onto the water buses.
Yeah.
Almost as if they're trying to push people over to the barges. But of course, there is not enough room on the water buses for everybody and freight, so I suppose they have to use the barges. But getting back to that weather protection, now, I'm presuming you will put your hand up for some perspex screening to try and keep the right weather off us. That wouldn't be too hard now, would it, David?
Well, that sounds like a relatively cheap option when you consider the sort of things that people are asking for, like bridges and stuff. I think that's I think it's a necessity in this day and age to be standing out in the elements. We know how violent the rain can be, and certainly of late. Rain, hail. So, yeah, I would certainly support that.
Well, that's good because unlike when we last met, I am now disabled. I got an MS 2 years ago, and I tell you what, I can't. If it's raining, I can't use the water bus. It's just that simple. Can't handle the rain. So I've got a new perspective on disabled people because now being one, it's amazing how much you didn't realise was going on.
It's a bit like Prince Harry because he's done a lot for wounded soldiers.
Yes, the Invictus Games.
He actually operated as if he was. He stayed in a wheelchair, and I thought that was pretty impressive for approach for a young bloke like that.
It's a pretty impressive approach for anyone. You were speaking about bridges a moment ago. Now, there is some debate about the need for a barge/boat ramp down at Rocky Point. I'm not a great one for, and I'll probably get hate mail for this, I'm not a great one myself for a bridge, other than if it was a necessity, which is getting close to it, because after all we are islands, and I'm one of the people who wanted to live on an island, but the evacuation on the southern end of Russell Island is virtually not possible, and the island can very easily be cut in half by bushfires, as was recently shown, well, last year anyway. We're just sort of waiting with bated breath for the next set of wildfires to go through. A boat ramp at the Rocky Point, which is the southern end, would you be in favour of that?
Well, there was a proposal some time ago, certainly when I ran again, and I said yeah, because I think there's employment opportunities over at Rocky Point and Stieglitz, that area there, because the government had in mind sort of marine industry development there. I don't know where that is at the moment, but the labour force is there on Russell, and only a hop away, really, if there was a regular barge.
Yes, well...
I mean, it's important that we create as many local jobs as possible, and the barge might actually make an incentive for more industry to locate when there's a labour force. You think the labour force at Jacobs Wells comes from places like Beenleigh and Loganholme and
Eagleby, yeah.
Whereas, Russell Island is by far closer. So, opportunity to take a bit more traffic off the M1. So I think there's a lot of positives in that, providing that the industrial development is in keeping with the local environment. So you don't particularly want something that's too dirty, or if it is, it's well protected.
Which allows me to very cleverly segue into my next question.
Right.
The permanently delayed application at Wynham Creek.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I'm not calling it a provisionally the priority. I'm calling it permanently delayed. Question number one. Do you think it's going to happen?
I think it will in time.
In Wynham Creek.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate that the upgrading there has been delayed, but I don't see the future as being more and more car parks, I'm afraid.
Which brings me to my next segue that I can bring up. You may remember, when was it that we met? Was that one election or 2 elections ago? 2.
2, was it?
Yeah 2. You may remember that I was giving all 3 of you that are up on the stage a hard time. You were the only one that was good enough to give me a straight answer. And I'm going to ask you the same question again. Would you be in favour of a 50% support in the price of barges to try and move the car traffic from the mainland so that we can afford to actually take the cars over to the mainland and bring them back, rather than clogging up acres and acres of car parks? We could quite easily, if the prices were reduced down to what they used to be, which would require something like a 50% subsidy. And again, as I said when I interviewed you back then, it's quite easy to find out how much is required. I mean, they have to fill out their BAS statements and all the rest of it. But all of that land is state land. And by removing the need for the parking, by reducing the barge fares, you would effectively be getting a nice little windfall financially. And you might actually be able to get a PTA through, because I can't imagine any investors wanting to take on the very annoyed worker bees on the mainland which would swarm all over anything that would threaten their parking.
Yeah.
So would you still be in favour of a 50% barge subsidy?
We're in favour of bringing across the board transport costs down to an absolute minimum. We've actually got an initiative with bring fares down within the Brisbane and Greater Brisbane area to $1 a trip. Now that wouldn't happen overnight because if you suddenly did it, you'd be swarmed with people, and you've got to look at what sort of infrastructure you need. But our policy is very much on getting people out of cars and getting them onto public transport. I always said that the problems on the southern Moreton Bay Islands are in no way different to the people in southeast Queensland. What's the big talking point in southeast Queensland? Traffic congestion.
Terrible.
Car parking. I mean, I was in Capalaba yesterday. I couldn't believe the amount of traffic at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yes.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. To a point where, we're having to queue to get in and out of the car parks. The roads were just, the road systems are just so unfriendly to people, quite honestly. As you've got to project, they're talking about bringing another 1 or 2 million people into southeast Queensland. How the hell are we going to get around?
Well, where are we going to put them?
Exactly, where are you going to put them? You can find accommodation for them. That's not a problem. You can densify, but people don't particularly like high dense living. The question I think you've got to ask yourself is, where are we going to be in 10, 20 years' time? We can't keep adding more and more people and ignoring the need for people to get around.
Well, that idea of yours of $1 fares, now that I can segue again, here we go, into the TransLink levy and the zoning. Now, they're two separate questions. We cop about $1 million a year worth of bills from TransLink. That's just a simple way to put it. But more importantly, I find, is the unfair zoning. We are being it could possibly be looked at as discriminated against, because the zone that we're in is the same as the Gold Coast or the Sunshine Coast for some unknown reason, and yet we're like 5 kilometres offshore from Redland Bay.
It's because of all that lovely lifestyle you have there over in the southern Moreton Bay Island.
Oh yes, it's tough living on a subtropical island, but somebody's got to do it.
That's right, yeah.
Look, I mean, being one zone further out would be fair enough. That'd be like being in another suburb, but we're 2 or 3 zones.
Yeah, no, that's right. But
you'd be prepared to review that with a look to bring it back.
Patronage decline, not increase, in the last I think 6-8 years. Which is abysmal.
Yeah, but not on the islands.
Well,
on the islands, it's just gone through the roof. Yeah, we've got no choice. The Wyndham Creek is actually one of the busiest ports in the country, because it is actually a port. It was made a port when the flying boats were coming in.
Yeah, but that's we're talking the fundamentals here. People keep on voting for with the major parties, and what do we get? We just get more and more of the same. There's no one thinking outside the box.
I think there's going to be a change in this election, particularly within this electorate, David, and you've managed to upset the apple cart well and truly by getting to number 1.
Yes, I know.
That's very handy.
I know. And Brad's got number 1 in Ujaroo, so we got 2 1s out of 3, which wasn't bad.
Well, you might just be in with a chance this time, because it's anybody's race.
Yeah, well, it could be. We've got a full card this time. We have, they've done away with vote 1, and that's it. So they've got to number the card. So
speaking of the numbers on the cards and the people on it.
No, look, I think Kim Richards got a good chance of getting across the line. I mean, Matt, a nice guy, I got no problem with him, but he's sort of noticeable by his absence, if you know what I mean. Certainly has as far as a lot of people have said to me. And it's hard to sort of count exactly what he's done, but I always feel sorry for opposition backbenchers. They haven't got any clout. But anyway,
that's true. Now, there's another guy on there who had a rather interesting proposal that he put forward, and that's Peter Dowling. Now, I have no problems at all with Peter. I think the media's treatment of him was absolutely dreadful. I mean, what people do behind their bedroom doors is their own business, but he did have a rather interesting proposal, and that was having a causeway to Panican, relocating all of the infrastructure for the transport onto Panican and the parking onto Panican, which may seem sort of counterproductive ecologically speaking, but it certainly could solve the parking problems and the transport problems, because we're only just now beginning to get into trouble. It is going to get worse, probably on a logarithmic scale. Yep. It's going to be absolutely dreadful in 1 or 2 years, and in 5 years it's going to be, well, who knows what it could possibly be like. The projected, of course, population for here is 22,000. That's 7,000 cars on the mainland. Where are we going to put them?
Yeah.
Why don't we put them on Panican? What would your thoughts be on that?
The whole fundamentals of the way the islands were dealt with and thrown at Redland Shire Council levels at the time and subdivided is a sore that's not going to be healed.
Yeah, it's a weeping sore, isn't it?
That's right. Unless the government, says, look, we're going to have to buy up the balance of land. We can't have more people on there. The government's made a huge mistake in allowing what happened on the Southern Moreton Bay Islands, and it's getting worse. Have they got reticulated sewage there on
Nope.
Bay?
No, they got it on. This is a ridiculous thing. Stratty's got a population of approximately 2,000. I used to spend a lot of time over on Stratty when I was running the print paper, but we've got almost 5 times that population. If we haven't got 10,000 yet, it's got to be bloody close. The Bureau of Statistics running the census, it's always considered to be a bit of a joke. And of course last time was even worse than ever, because of course it didn't get out and people couldn't do it. Got to be around about 9 or 10,000. We need a school, because it's just going to increasingly get worse as young families move here, because it's the only place they can afford. We need a school, a secondary school. What would you have to say about a secondary school?
Well, I think it's just moving the deck chairs around, quite honestly.
I wonder if they actually did that.
I'll say one thing about the school. I know that the schools, that the kids who go to Cleveland and the other, are treated as if they're come from another planet almost.
Yes.
It's not a good social experiment.
That's very true. Having just had my youngest one has just finished school, and all 3 of them went through, yes, those types of problems. You're quite right there, David.
Yeah.
Now,
but I mean, if the numbers would justify a school, what tends to happen is at a certain time you get the numbers to justify a school, and then 5 years, 10 years down the track, the demographics change. I mean, should the island really become like a large retirement village so that you don't have that sort of issue? I mean, I really think that the government's got to stand back and do a study and say, look...
Funny you should say that. I've got another point, which was the very next point.
Yeah.
A survey of the islands. Now...
Well, they've had plenty of surveys, but they don't have much action.
That's true. However, you're now speaking to somebody who actually used to be out on the road, pounding the streets, working for a survey company.
Yeah.
When I was a poor student, I went out there and I surveyed people and took products around to show them and stuff like that. A proper survey with somebody actually knocking on doors, door to door, asking the questions, making sure they realise that it's a non-judgmental type of a survey, something like the census. Would you be in favour of backing a survey of that ilk rather than the type that has been done previously online, which is successful to a degree, but can't get everybody. Mail outs, which quite often get ignored, and also, of course, can't get to absentee landlords. Would you be in favour of backing a properly and exhaustive survey of the islands?
Yeah, by all means, because I don't think you can plan properly, whatever the outcome of the planning is going to be or whatever, unless you've got the inputs, and the inputs of who's there and what the demographic detail of the population shows. I think it's true everywhere. We tend to deal in aggregate numbers, like they say, it's not bad. Australia's unemployment's 5.8, or it's 6 in Queensland, but does that mean that there's 94% of people in full-time work? No, it doesn't. It means there's probably 40% are in part-time work or work a couple of hours a week. Politicians love throwing around numbers, but the more detail you got, then it's harder to argue with the facts. So
I can bring
important, but I wouldn't want to emphasise let's do studies and let's do what have you. I'm more interested. You started off with a very practical idea, which is doable, about protection for the pontoons. I'd like to see some. If I were elected, you've got to kick some goals to start with, and it's no good saying, the first thing I'm going to do is do a detailed survey. I think you need to kick a few goals first and get people to say, well, this bloke's an action person, right? Not talk. And then once you've understood the needs, then start working on that. The problem is with these things is, having worked in a number of sort of industries like retirement living or aged care, I don't know how many reports I wrote that just got stuck on shelves, and every year they've want it reviewed. I said, well, what are you using it for? It's obvious what's needed to be done. You need to revitalise your stock or your accommodation. But
speaking of aged care, there is none on the islands. In any way, shape or form, but aged means health, which brings me around to another topic which is kind of close to my heart, because I'm disabled now. I was talking to one of the technicians in the MRI department at the PA, and they were saying how old their MRI machine is. Now, this may be a fool's dream, fantasy, but would you be prepared to look into perhaps getting the MRI machine for PA upgraded, and we can get the old MRI from PA and put it in a Redlands? The reason I ask is because I had a stroke. It was only a TIA, but if there'd have been an MRI at Redlands Hospital, they've got a CAT scanner, but they don't have an MRI. If I'd have been put under an MRI, my multiple sclerosis would have been diagnosed on the spot.
Well, I think, Tim, it's all a question of priorities, and I know from working in the healthcare system that they're damn expensive pieces of gear, not only to purchase but to operate.
Oh yes.
And that's the problem. Everyone has a wish list of, we all would like to see more money put into healthcare. At the end of the day, you've got to have some balance, and I'd be looking at. I think the important thing would be to upgrade the MRI at PA, but ensure that there's a rapid way in prioritisation so people can actually, the population, whether they're on the Bay Islands, there could be helicopter to PA. They've got they'll be there in 20 minutes if need be.
I understand that. My mother was choppered off the island to PA. Kidney stones, but it's not really, well, I appreciate the thought. I have to go for an MRI, I think it's in February, and they're not going to chop me off. I'm going to have to do my usual trick and take my mobility scooter to the mainland, then pick up my car and then drive to the PA and...
You haven't mentioned the DRT, this idea of being able to hail a cab and at minimal cost, which they're unrolling. I see in Logan, and I thought in Redlands. Does that extend to the island where you can get a cab to a major shopping centre or railway station for I think $3 or something?
That's the state government initiative, is it not?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
I've heard of it, but I haven't used it. Reason being
it should be extended to the islands. I mean, here's another example where the islands miss out.
Well, I've actually got that on my list to ask you as well. We have something in the order, just on this island, that's Macleay, of something like 10 or 12 courtesy buses, believe it or not. The boat club's got 2. The... Arts Centre's got 1 or 2, the Bowls Club's got 2, the Golf Club's got 2, the pub's got 1, there's 2 taxis on the island.
You need a transport authority for the island, don't you?
Yeah, we've got no buses. Seriously,
no.
None of the islands have a bus. They did try to use the school bus once, but it wasn't commercially viable. But we've got all these courtesy buses. Now, I'm just sort of throwing this one out there for the state government to recompense the various club owners or business owners who've got these courtesy buses.
Yeah.
Basically, buy them off them and run the courtesy bus services, giving those organisations priority for their own particular needs and clientele, and also recompensing the taxis as well. Yeah. But we don't need, I don't think, it's a personal view, actual buses. The courtesy buses do quite well, and the drivers already know where everybody lives. Yeah. So we've got we've got the infrastructure, we've got the people. Now we need is somebody in government to say, okay, this is silly, we've got duplication of vehicles and people. Why don't we put it all under one umbrella, so to speak, and put a bus service together? My God, we've even got bus stops on the island with numbers on them, which don't have any services.
Yeah.
Silly thing. Do we need buses, David, do you think?
Well, I think you obviously do, and if you're talking about getting to a point where you've got a school, then you don't want to replicate what happens on the mainland, where at 8 o'clock and 3 o'clock the place gets overrun by four-wheel drives. Having a viable bus service was a good way of alleviating that problem. The issue of a transit authority is now Labour policy, I believe. It's part of their manifesto. So you could argue that you could have a mini transit authority for the island, and obviously then there'd be communication with the South East Queensland Transit Authority. I mean, this idea goes back to the 90s. There was a thing called Sector, which is South East Queensland Transit Authority, which was to coordinate the trains and the buses and whatever. I can see no reason. If you've got that infrastructure, though, or the fleet, if you've got the fleet of buses on the island, then I'm sure for government help, certainly to seed fund it, and perhaps to provide sort of timetabling and coordination or whatever skills are required, then the existing fleet could be used. There's no, I think in the, with the nature of the roads and whatever, large buses are not viable, but certainly small courtesy type buses, 12 to 20 seaters or whatever, would be ideal. Well, if not ideal, would certainly be better than what you've got at the moment, which is sort of
bugger all.
Something that's half baked. You're a member of the RSL or something, that's fine. But if you're not, then.
And just another couple of quick questions, because I'm about to run out of space on my phone because I'm recording this. Adani, yes or no?
Oh, you know, we're the only party that's fully against Adani, and that's because we've got a bit of vision. We realise that old coal is not the way to go. I mean, and so do the finance industry.
I'll throw you a wobbly one.
Yeah.
Now, I know that the Greens are generally speaking against nuclear power.
Yeah.
However, and this is a question without notice, and I wouldn't expect you to know, I'm going to put an article about it up on the Baala news site. Thorium. Are you familiar with thorium?
It's sort of a cleaner element as far as radioactive elements go, I believe.
Yes, and it's actually more common in the Earth's crust than tin, than nickel. It's extremely common, and it is extremely safe. It can't melt down. It just basically turns off before going through the meltdown. Now, I know you're an individual member, of course, but would you be at least interested in looking at the research? Because
of course. I mean,
that would solve a big problem in Australia, because there's more thorium than there is uranium. And it's easier to get at.
We haven't got a problem in Australia. The problem we've got in Australia is the fossil fuel industry.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got enough sun coming out the skies in Australia to power the rest of the world. So there's no need to even look at nuclear. I mean, the thing about nuclear is it may sound like a good idea, but then when you come to actually want to locate the plant, nobody wants it near them. It's got to be near water, so it means it's got to be on the coast. And you can imagine what it'd be like if they said, oh, we're going to put a new one somewhere north of Sydney or north of Brisbane or north of New South Wales. It wouldn't happen. So, you know, you can talk about nuclear, and I don't know the ins and outs of thorium-generated nuclear energy, whether it needs as much cooling. But that is a big problem. You know, it's fine talking theory, but let's get down to the practicalities. Where would you put it?
Well, that's true. I mean, there is actually one running at the moment in China, but I'll leave it at that because my phone's about to run out of memory.
I might have a look at that and get back to you, huh?
Yeah, I'm going to do an article. It's this election has thrown my timetable out terribly. Yeah. But look, I'd like to thank you very much for your time, David.
That's all right, Tim.
And wish you all the best. And have you got any idea who you're going to preference, just as a matter of interest?
Oh, we've gone to Kim and well, there's only 5, you see, so in Redlands. So 3 would be Peter, and then LNP, and then One Nation. Our policy is to have LNP and One Nation last, so that wasn't difficult. So they go 4 and 5. I go 1. The question was, will we put Peter between ourselves and Labour? And our local branch said, we don't want anything to do with Peter Dowling, I'm afraid. So, and
now, you see,
I personally get on fine with Peter.
Yes, so do I. I mean, I can't understand it. I mean, the media should be hanging its head in shame.
Yeah, but the media crucify everybody. You know, look at the rubbish in the Courier Mail that we get every day. They're throwing stuff at us, and you know, but unfortunately, that's life. And
well, that's why I refuse to call myself a journalist.
Yeah.
I'm a webmaster and a reporter and a writer, but I'm damned if I'll call myself a journalist. I won't lower myself down to that standard. No. All they want to do is sell
to the bottom.
Yeah, and they never of course, they can't possibly let the facts get in the way of a good story.
No.
Okay, David, thanks, mate.
Okay, Tim.
I'll put this up. It'll be up on the site sometime today.
Okay, if I get anything useful, I'll send it to you. Okay?
Thanks, mate. Toodaloo.
Thanks, bye.
Bye now.